very few practices that will be the key things that will make a difference. So that's what we're focusing on, and we're doing that by what we're learning in our research. You're looking at now at our coaches. We've got 4 professionally trained coaches. The first 3 on the left have master's degrees in coaching and have been doing this for quite some time. So, and Jane and Jessica are the coaches that have been working with us here in the Southeastern Minnesota Synod with the 5 congregations that have been in our first cohort. So they've been here quite a bit. Their bios are on our website, by the way. We also take groups on immersion experiences. I just want to make sure that you know that. So we do more than just work with congregations because we're focused on growing leaders. We have a group that just got back from Turkey and Greece following in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. If you're looking for like a continuing ed opportunity that will blow your mind, you need to do this. It's phenomenal. We take folks to Peru. You heard my story yesterday about hiking the Inca Trail. Well, we do that every year in June. Not the trail every year, but the trip every year. We have been going to Ethiopia with an organization called Acts of Wisdom, building libraries and working on growing leaders in Ethiopia. And new this year, in September, we are for the first time walking the Camino de Santiago. This is a pilgrimage in Spain, and we still have some openings if anybody wants to join us. This is our first time doing this. I can't wait. So that's just a little bit about the pilgrimages. And the reason we do those is to invite people to leave behind what's going on their to-do list and their iPhones, and to enter into liminal space. And to go into that in-between place that we heard about in our worship this morning, where we can find God moving in our lives in new ways. And we found this to be one of the most transformative things we can do to grow leaders. But we're also doing synod journeys, not just journeys out of the country. And one of those is with your synod. We're also working with 3 other synods, the Southwest Texas Synod, Delaware, Maryland Synod, and the Gulf Coast Synod. And just to share a couple of stories about that. Kristen, this is your cue. You can make your way forward. I wanted to just tell you that one of the congregations, I've talked to many people here who are telling me that they're from small rural areas. Is that any of you in the room? Okay. So I just have hope for you, okay? We've been working with congregations like yours all over the country and larger congregations. But these are unique settings, these rural communities. And if you want to check this out, we have a free resource on our website called the 10-Minute Toolbox. April 2015's Toolbox is an interview I did with Rich Nelson, a pastor in Greenvine, Texas. The city is a population of 300 people. The congregation had 45 people when he came. Most of them were in the family, as you can imagine, right? You relate to this. And long story short, they did the listening process, this tune-in process that we teach. And they discovered the needs in their community were great, way bigger than they could handle as a small congregation. So together with the Ministerial Alliance, they have formed a nonprofit called Burton Bridge Ministries. Burton Bridge Ministries has 13 congregations that could never get along on any theological point, but can come together on behalf of their community, and they are changing the landscape of this neighborhood. You can't believe what they're doing together. It's phenomenal. They've created after-school programs for the African-American kids, most of whom aren't part of any of these congregations. They're helping the elderly. They're working to make sure people have heat or wheelchair ramps or whatever it takes. Anyway, check out that video if you want to learn more about how small congregations can make a big difference. And I want to invite Kristen, who is with the cohort, our first cohort, the pilot that we're doing here, to share a little about her story.
Not in front of the projector. First of all, I want to say there are more people in this room than there are in my sanctuary on Sunday mornings. Okay? Yeah, we average about 50, and I think there's more than that here right now. My name is Pastor Kristen Bain, and I'm at Community Lutheran in Geneva. Geneva is popular because it has a really good appliance store and a really good meat market. Okay? But that's about it. It's a community about 500, I think, and I've been there for almost 2 years. And when I got there, one of the questions I asked the congregation was, what are you known for in the community? And they all looked at me and went, meatballs? Okay. I'm sure you all have stories like that. But we've been talking about what our ministry is and what we're called to do in this location. And when I found the LEAD program last year, I was all excited about it and said, sign us up, sign us up, sign us up. And it was a lot of talking with the congregation to get them on board to do this too. But I had a group of people on council who were also excited about discovering who we are and what kind of ministry we can do. And so we've been doing a lot of talking. Taking the self-assessments was a really interesting endeavor because they really highly encourage you to do them online, whereas 60% of my congregation doesn't have internet access because they say they're too old to learn how to do it. So I did a lot of inputting. And how they see the congregation and how I saw the congregation, I don't think I'm supposed to know this, is totally different, which was really fun to see their perspective of what they think they're doing. So when we got our assessment back, we were 75% of the answers, if not more, was on the bottom half of the grid. Some thought we were stalled and some thought we were out of breath, which means they're searching and they're trying to discover what they're going to do. So we were highly suggested to do the listening process, which I think is phenomenal. Part of what we do is that we create a listening team, which was a little difficult because no one was quite sure they wanted to do it. So we got 5, and we're like short because you're supposed to have 6 to 8. But we're going with the 5 we have, and it's a nice cross of the congregation. And when we started doing the listening team, you start in by listening to God through Scripture and reflecting together about what the Scriptures are saying to you in your community. And then you start the process of listening to the congregation. And that's the process we're in right now, is that we want to know what they think are the possibilities of the ministries we can do in the neighborhood and what impact we could do in our neighborhood. But then, if those of you who know where Geneva is, we didn't know what our neighborhood was. It was like, how do we figure this out? So we created a big map of Freeborn and Steele counties with Waseca kind of put in there too. And we asked people to put pins on it, and we gave them red pins for where they live and black pins for where they hang out, whether it be their job or where they spend their time. And I don't know about you, but one of the people in the congregation, where we go to the doctor too? I said, yeah, that'll work. So what we discovered is we have a lot of red pins in Geneva and Ellendale and very few black pins. So what does it mean to be a congregation in a community that people live but they don't hang out in? So that's one of the things we're looking at right now. We created our questionnaire to give out to the congregation to do, and we're in the process of start looking at the answers, but it was really interesting to work with the team to come up with the questions to ask the congregation. Because first we decided we better ask them where they thought the neighborhood was, so we get a better generalization. And then we decided, because I don't know about your congregation, but most of the people who come on Sunday morning are over the age of 70. Yeah. We have a lot of young people in the congregation, but because we're such a veteran community, they're all so tired, they need their Sabbath and rest time on Sunday, so we're trying to figure out how to do that too. So we decided that one of our questions had to do about what the legacy was going to be, but we thought that would be hard to unpack. So I'm so happy with what the team came up with. Their question was, in 2050, what do you hope will be the stories about the ministry's impact of the neighborhood from 2016? So we get to that whole, what do you hope what your legacy is going to be within the congregation? Because we have a lot of people that are worried that we're going to be shutting down because we're old and there's no one there to take over. And then we asked a question about what their passion is to do in the neighborhood. You know, what passion can you use to go out and to make a difference in the neighborhood? And we actually got more people to fill out the congregational questionnaire than we did to fill out the assessment, which I thought was amazing, because they were all kind of looking at me like, you want us to do what? So just trying very creative ways of getting them going. But the team is just so excited. They're just fun. We got going late, and I thought we were really slow, and then I realized we were the farthest along in the cohort, which was really funny. But once we get our meeting times going, we met for an hour and a half every week for about 6 weeks. And we'd have dinner or we'd have lunch together after worship, and the team just loves getting together. It's just fun watching the team get cohesive as they look for what we're going to do as a ministry in the neighborhood. I have some ideas where it's going to go, and I'm not sure if that's how it's going to play out or not. Let me tell you a little background. The congregation is right between 2 bus stops in Geneva, and I watch 20 to 30 kids get off the bus every afternoon, which is kind of fun. So there's a lot of kids. I think there's going to be some kid stuff going on. I also think it's a really big senior citizens center, so I think there's going to be some of that going on too. So I'm just excited about what we're going to do to all that kind of stuff. All right?
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah. So this congregation is on its way to figuring out how to be a remarkable congregation in their neighborhood. And like she said, it wasn't easy to get started, but they're on their way now. Just to tell you a little bit about what they're up to. The Synod journey includes taking the lead assessment, which I think you did a good job describing. There is a paper version, and we prefer the digital, so someone will have to enter it in if it's paper. It's only 20 questions. Takes about 15 minutes to take. We have then the opportunity for folks to put together their lead team and bring them to 3 learning seminars throughout the year. During that learning seminar, we teach the process, and then we teach a lot of skills. I'm going to give you kind of a top look at some of these today. But a lot of skills that we know are important if you're going to be leading your congregation through what we think of as leading a movement, moving your congregation into the future. We also invite the congregations to work with a coach. So this is a one-on-one opportunity for one of our lead coaches to work with the pastor and the facilitator of the tune-in team, or whatever team it is you end up building, to move forward, so that every month there is ongoing support. What we know is when people attend workshops or seminars and they get fired up about something, and then they go back to their congregation, it's very hard to put that into play. And so the team makes a big difference in helping leaders stay the course of the goals that they set for themselves. Here's what we don't do. We don't say that in a year you're going to be here. Like, we can't predict the outcome. So I want to just be transparent about that. This is not a cookie cutter approach that we think every congregation is going to do X. It's not like that. What we're doing is opening ourselves up to a discernment process. What is God doing in your place? What are the gifts and the resources you have? What are the gifts and the resources in your neighborhood, and how can that come together? And that would be the tune-in process. There are actually 4 processes, and I'm going to unpack those for you. Yes?
So when we do the assessments, do we put our names in? So like,
Yes.
you?
We do ask for your name. Now, in your email address, no one who takes the assessment gets dumped into our lead newsletter. Okay, so we don't feel like that would be, we don't do any marketing to these people. It's just a matter of us making sure that we're getting just one person for each assessment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for sure. And so if you were going to enter that on behalf of somebody else, you would just enter their information. If they don't have an email address, we get that. Yeah. Okay, it's a great question. So I'm wondering about this question for you. Do you wonder about the leadership in the church and in the world, and what you can really do to make a difference? I mean, that's a question I wrestle with. You know, I want to do something that matters with my life, and I think all of us feel like that. In the work we're doing with Lead, we actually really take seriously that leadership is hope. All throughout scriptures, we have story after story of God using everyday people to change the world. This has always been true, and it's not any less true today. And so we believe that tuning into what God is doing, actually trying to pay attention to how God is moving around us, will make a difference in how we behave as leaders. I think during my keynote yesterday, you got to meet Martha. Were you all in the room?
Yeah.
My cow? Yeah. So, I mean, I think the truth is our church is stale. It's harsh to say that. But our world is changing faster than our congregations in most cases. Now, that wouldn't be true for every congregation, we know that. But there are things that we can do to help our congregation move into the dynamic world that's happening around us. I'm going to share a little about that. You know, this idea, and if you haven't watched this YouTube from Seth Godin, check it out. It's awesome. So here's what I wanted to talk with you about in our workshop today. What if we could be the church that got serious about sending people out? We could stop feeling lousy about them not coming, and we could start thinking seriously about what it is to be the church that sends. Because people do leave, right? They go to work every day, they go into their schools every day, they go into their homes, they sit at their kitchen tables, they go wherever they go. And what we're talking about is shifting our mindset from thinking about church as a destination to thinking about church as a place of departure, a place of sending. It's a big switch if we can think like that. In fact, I think this is what it takes to be a church that's remarkable, that's worthy of attention. It's a flip of the idea of bringing people to us. Can you wrap your head around that? Think about how different your ministries and your congregation would be if you paid attention to whoever is in the room, recognizing that that is not the destination of their week. It's actually the launching pad for their time. So what gets said in a sermon, what gets said in a Bible study, in a Christian context, or however it is that you're nurturing faith in small groups, is about the everyday. It's about pushing people out to not evangelize in a way that Lutherans feel really awkward about, but actually to be the church wherever they go, to bless the world with their way of being. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay. So the ministry of being an attraction church, you know, all the bells and whistles, that kind of a ministry is not what I'm talking about. I think it's great if your congregation can have those kinds of resources. Many congregations cannot. So what we are talking about, instead of being an attractional church, is to be a church that's worthy of attention. And here's why this matters, one of the many reasons. Mark Dunkelman has written this book called The Vanishing Neighbor. I don't know if anyone has read it. He is a historian, and it's fascinating. What he tells us is that the way relationships function today are very, very different than the way they have functioned in this country since the beginning of the United States. So he's looking back since our country was formed, and he's making the argument that when we moved from being a agricultural world to more of an industrial world, the way in which people related to one another did not shift. People expected it to, but it did not. And when we moved from mom staying home with the kids and going into the workplace, people thought that was eroding the fabric of the country. But actually, relationships did not shift. However, today, we are facing an upheaval in the way our relationships with one another are taking place. And this is important. He talks about imagining that you were the planet Saturn and that you had these rings of relationships around you, okay? We all have these. What he said is, in the past, and see if this isn't resonating for you, we had this inner ring. This is our family and our dearest friends, the people who know us best, who are around us. Then we had around that a middle ring. This would be our neighborhood. It's the people you sit on the bleachers with to watch a ball game, the people you run into the grocery store with. We had a really active middle ring of community around us, and we have had a very thin outer ring beyond that neighborhood. Now, I know this is true in my life. I know that when I was in 9th grade and I cut school for the first time, and I went to McDonald's for lunch with my friends, the ones who could drive, I ran into Miss Barbara, who lived next door, and before I got home from school, guess who knew about it? I couldn't hide in that city. But today, guess what? All this has changed. In fact, we no longer have the rings operating in the way they have before. How many of you feel really close to your neighbors? Oh my gosh. It's worse than I thought. Okay. But this is true, isn't it? Like, I know 2 of the people who live on my street. And one is Chinese, Mandarin-speaking family, and one is from India. but they're dear friends because we've worked at it. But actually, I don't know the rest of them. And isn't that interesting? And isn't that unfortunate? But that's my middle ring, which is actually eroding. On the other hand, today, what's happening is our inner ring, which is our dearest friends and family who know us best, is actually increasing. Okay? So hence helicopter parents, think about that. Hence the way we're always doing cell phone, we're in touch through text messages with the people who are in our lives. That is getting to be a thicker ring of relationships for us. The middle ring is decreasing, and in some cases almost non-existent. But the outer ring is growing. And what's making that happen? Absolutely, social media, absolutely. So it used to be 27 years ago when I went to El Salvador for the first time, and I fell in love with the people there, and I knew I would always come back, that I would write a letter to them, yes, in English, and sadly enough, I'd have to have someone translate it, and then they would send it. 3 months later, they would get my letter, and they would write me back. And 3 months later, I would get their letter. Today, when I put that I am here with you on Facebook, my friends in El Salvador will like it. Isn't that cool? I mean, we are connected like crazy in each other's lives. That means we can pray for each other when one of them gets sick. I know it immediately. They were Facebooking me like crazy about the floods we have in Houston, wondering if we were okay. I mean, this is real. Okay? I mean, we're really in each other's lives, but our worlds are very different from each other. So we've got now this very thick outer ring. Well, Dunkelman also tells us that our brain can actually only manage about 150 relationships at a time. Now that's kind of a relief to me, honestly, because I feel lousy about not being able to keep up with all my relationships. And you probably do too. Every year when you get those Christmas cards and you're like, dang, I really meant to spend some time with them this year, and it just didn't happen. Yeah, it's because you can't do it. We can only, at best, and that's, I think on a good day, about 150 relationships. If our inner ring and our outer ring are expanding, we don't really have capacity. It's really part of the way your brain is functioning. We're doing the best we can, is the point. But guess where the church fits in these rings? It could be all of them, but right now it generally sits in the middle ring. All institutions sit in that middle ring. This is why all institutions, if you work for a university or a hospital or any kind of a thing that's part of an institution, you know they're struggling with this. I got off the phone last night with my son who works at the Museum of Fine Art in Santa Fe, and he's like, this museum doesn't actually care about the real people who come to the museum. They only care about the art, and they don't understand if they don't care about the people, there's no point in having a museum. I mean, like, this is happening everywhere, this shift, right? And so we're caught up in this, and we have to ask ourselves this question. Are we going to stay in this decreasing middle ring? Or are we going to pay attention to the expanding inner ring and get even more serious than ever about how we equip people, we send people into their homes to be the pastors at their kitchen table, to do what Luther built the catechism to do in the first place, to be missionaries in our own homes? Are we going to equip people to bring their faith with them when they go on social media, when they go to the outer ring? And how does the church get a presence in that outer ring and in that inner ring? Now maybe every church can't do everything, so you've got to figure out what you can do best. And that's the kind of listening that we're working on, is paying attention to these shifts that are going on in the world around us. You guys, we can't stop this. This is bigger than the church, right? This is a seismic shift that's happening across the planet, not just in the United States, although he's really writing about the U.S. situation. This is really important. So LEAD is taking seriously 4 growth indicators. You heard them from me yesterday, if you were in the room. And you've already heard us talk a little bit about listening. That's what I'm going to spend most of our time on today, is how we listen. But just by way of thinking about all 4, we're talking about being a congregation that is remarkable at listening, remarkable at centering, remarkable at exploring, and remarkable at connecting. So I'll unpack each of those for you. But let's start with this listening piece. A congregation that is remarkable at listening recognizes that their ministry is not just for the people who are already there. Now, this is how your congregation was planted when it was a mission start. It was initially focused on the neighborhood. They all were. But the fact of the matter is, there's so much going on within the people's lives of those who do come that it's hard for us to have the bandwidth, right? Unless we say purposefully that our congregation is going to be about hospitality and welcoming diversity in the people in our neighborhoods. And to do that, we have to get to know them. But this is hard. It's harder actually than I thought it would be to help congregations do this. So one congregation I'm working with, actually one of our coaches is working with in San Antonio, and she called to tell me about this, is a congregation that has put together their listening questions now and has listened in their congregation. One of their questions was, just catch the question, what are the 3 things that has to change in this congregation for us to be more welcoming? The listening team that has been working on this got the answers back. The listening team said, and this was her call to me this last week, the aha was, the listening team was so surprised at how many answers had to do with welcoming, because they were really wondering what things needed to be changed. And she said, but you asked the question about welcoming people. Even the listening team that's working on this isn't fully bought in on the idea. Does that make sense? I mean, this is hard to wrap your head around, that your church is not just for you and the people who are there. That our youth ministry is not for just the children of our members, but actually for any child in the neighborhood, right? And that requires a different way of being. It's a flip. We have to think outside instead of inside. We have a lot of blind spots when it comes to this kind of listening. And one book that's been super helpful for me, if you want to, there's a couple of books I'll recommend. On making change, I'll recommend the book Switch by Heath and Heath. On actually getting deeper into relationships, I would recommend the book by Judith Glazier. It's called Conversational Intelligence. And one of the things that Judith talks about, there are many, is that we have blind spots in how we listen. And I just want to go over a couple of these with you to see if they resonate for you. So we have assumptions that others see, feel, think, and hear as we see, think, feel, and hear, right? We pretty much think people are like us. Guess what? They're not. And you kind of have a taste of that when you're raising teenagers, if you've done that, right? Because they're not in the same place you're in, and they're kind of pointing that out. It's a blind spot. The other one that I really love is, let's see, this number 4. We have an assumption that we remember what others say, when actually we remember what we think about what others say. Think about the danger of that. Every pastor knows this. You know, when people walk out of the church and they shake their hands and they have a comment about the sermon, sometimes there's surprises in that because the pastor didn't actually say what a person heard. We have these filters in which we hear things, right? And what Glazier is pointing out as she talks about the different kinds of listening, the different kinds of conversations, is that there are things that we can do to actually help ourselves hear what others are saying. So we're going to have an exercise now to see if you guys can do this. Are you ready? Yeah. I'm going to ask you to stick your neck out a little bit, and we're going to try this. Are you in for it? Okay, it's like a 5-minute exercise. So you're actually going to be, I'm going to invite you to be in groups of 3. One of you will be a speaker. One of you will be the question asker. And the other one will be a note taker. And I've got paper, okay? So it's really simple. We may do a couple rounds. We'll see how it goes. But what I want you to do, if you are the speaker and you agree to speak, is to respond to the questions I'm going to put up in a second. It's just one question. If you are the listener, you will have to continue to ask questions to help them tell more. If they're not able to fully ask, you'll say, what do you mean by that? Dig a little deeper. But you can't resonate. You can't say, yeah, I feel like that too, blah, blah, blah. No. You have to only listen, okay? If you are the note taker, what you're trying to do is capture what that person's intent is, what they're really saying, not what you think they're saying, but what they're really saying, and we'll check it out. Are you with me on this? All right. Well, when it says workshop, I feel you should actually work. I know, exactly. Okay. So yesterday, I had people fill out those little check boxes on the back of those check-in cards. It was so much fun to read those last night. And because I had the time, I didn't expect to, I went through and I calculated the responses. And these are the top 12 responses that your synod is saying about the things that we should be measuring in our congregations. They're interesting. By the way, I'm going to do this at the Gulf Coast Synod Assembly in a week, and we'll see if there's a difference across the country, right? Okay, so 58 people said that we should be measuring the number of people who serve beyond our congregation. 52 said we should be measuring the number of families participating. 44 said we should be measuring how many youth are staying after confirmation. 40 people said we should be taking a look at measuring how people tell their faith story. 39 said the number of people in learning groups, small groups, or Bible studies. 38, number of students confirmed. 37, people who invite others to church. 35, congregational service projects completed. Lots of value of service and confirmation. 33 people said number of people under age 21 in worship. 33 people said number of people in worship. 30 said a deep neighborhood connection, and 29 said families doing faith formation at home. So if you're the speaker, here's your question. What metric would indicate being a remarkable congregation and why? Okay, that's the question for the speaker.
Out of those?
Yes,
Out of all?
yes, out of these. And you have a pink card I gave you, so you've got them also in your hand. They're just, I'm going to leave these on the screen so that you can see the ones that were top priorities. Let's focus on the priorities. And what I want to know is, here's the thing. Whatever we measure gets reproduced. So let's measure what's going to help us be remarkable, right? What is the 1, 2, 3 things that you think we should definitely measure in order to help our church do something that matters? Okay, get in groups of 3. Decide who's the speaker, who's the listener, and who's the note taker. Are you ready? Go. And we'll get started. I'll tell you when it's time to start talking. Groups of 3.
I can shut off the audio so you guys can. No, I'll shut it down.
Okay, if I can have your attention. That's beautiful. Okay, everyone has a group of 3, yes? Okay, that was the hardest part. Now, we need one more over here. We could use another person. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Beth. Or Rolf, are you joining this group? No, you're just getting paper. Okay, and Beth, that would be great. And do we have, each group has a piece of paper to take notes? No, you're not turning this in. This is for your own. No, so spelling doesn't count. It's okay. Actually, can I change my mind? Because here's where, if you're willing to turn it in, we'll leave it as a question. If you're willing to turn in what you're thinking, it might help you with this research, okay? But if you don't want to turn it in, it's okay. So someone is a note taker, and the other person is helping push this question. What metric would indicate a remarkable congregation and why? You've got, I'll give you a minute and a half for the person to speak, the questioner to question, and the writer to write. Okay? Hang on, I'm going to tell you when to go, because I'm going to stop you when time's up. Okay, go. which role, let's do one more round, okay? I think it would be great. So if you would just decide amongst yourself who's going to take which role. If you're not going to be the writer anymore, just pass the paper, okay? And I'm going to give you again, we'll set the time. Ready? Go. Let's check this out one more time. For the person speaking, how was it? The talkers are happy. Did you, just out of curiosity, did you continue talking about the same metric or did you choose a different one? How many chose a different one? Most of you chose, okay. And then the others, same? Let's see the hands. So it's almost half and half. Okay, interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
Part of our conversation, we couldn't stay on the metric though. The metric always led to something beyond just.
Well, that's what I wonder if we even have the right metrics. As I was going through this last night and hearing the feedbacks, I mean, this was like a random, let's just check these out, okay? So your thoughts about that are really helpful. In fact, one of my favorite responses was on a card that said, we've moved to doing a narrative budget. What if we could have narrative metrics? More stories. I thought that was pretty rich of an answer, you know, because honestly, it is what's happening in people's lives we care about. So how about taking notes? Was that okay? Could you keep up? Hardly.
If you can refrain from getting into the conversation.
Oh yeah, so it's hard to not enter in. It's hard to really be a listener, isn't it? So now here's what I want you to do, and this is going to take just a second, and then I'll interrupt you again. Whoever has been taking notes, I want you to read back the notes to the people who've been talking to find out if you heard what they said. Give it a shot, okay? Try that.
Parents bring their children to Sunday school, but don't stay with them for worship. I can really relate to it.
Would you give yourself an A, B, C, D, or F on that? How'd you do? Pretty good? Oh, we got some F's over here. Yeah, okay. So let me just point out what we have done, okay? I want you to now learn what you have learned. Yesterday, I did a survey, really simple card. Very easy questions, people just checked them off. As if I were doing this in a worship service, during a sermon even, okay? And I got some feedback, pretty good, helpful feedback, really. Then I collated my feedback, I narrowed it down to what was the strongest representation of the voices I heard. And I gave that to you, my focus group, okay? And then you have honed it even farther by choosing the one that resonates with you and speaking into that. You have done a mini listening process. This kind of listening, friends, needs to happen in our congregations and in our neighborhoods. As we pay attention to what people can teach us, the danger for leaders is if we think everyone is thinking like us. What doesn't work is when leaders run too fast in front of their people, no one can follow. But what's even more dangerous is when leaders don't move. And I see it all the time. Leaders who think they would love to do something, but they don't have the courage to stick their neck out and try. Friends, this is our watch. Nobody's going to do this but us, right? If we care about our church and we care about God's mission, and we want our families to be participating in this, we need to make the way. And these little exercises, these kind of practices help us get ready to doing that. And practicing in our own congregations gives us courage to practice in our neighborhoods and our communities. Yeah.
When the bishop asked yesterday to help him think of a title for his sermon, it actually helped me listen.
Nice. So he invited you to co-create. You know what? There's nothing like that. And a friend of mine said people support what they help create. And I think it's true, isn't it? And so you're inviting collaboration. Nobody likes top down. We want to do it, and honestly, it's not helpful. And frankly, we're missing all those other voices. So in this room, let me just be kind of crass and blunt, we're missing generational voices. Okay, I see some young faces, but not many. We are missing ethnic voices, right? I see mostly white people in this room, which means there's a whole world of information that we're not able to glean from you, no matter how brilliant you are. You see my point? So we can be doing better than this. This is the kind of work we're doing with LEAD, is helping congregations raise their awareness, helping leaders get some skills so that they can take on some new behaviors. What we're not saying is if you do this, you'll be doing an X result, but we're saying if you do this, you will discover God's aha moments in the midst of this, and you will figure out how to be the church in a changing world in the way that is uniquely true for you and your setting, right? Everyone is different. So I'm going to just skip forward because we've got about 10 more minutes together. And I just want to overview the other processes. We spent a lot of time on listening because, frankly, I think it generally is the first place to start in most communities. Yeah, you could, if you want to move back to your place, you're very welcome to do that. Get comfortable, but do it fast. Okay, so remarkable centering is our next growth indicator. This is answering the question, why do we exist as a congregation? Not what is our mission statement that's been wordsmithed by 10 committees, but why do we exist in such a way that we can answer that? And congregations that are clear on why they exist, quite honestly, it shows up on their website. They organize everything they're doing around this. It's about knowing who you are and aligning around it. We also, in this getting centered, we call it the wake-up process, waking up to what God is already doing in your midst. We want to take a look at what your core values are and help you identify that. See, I believe there are 3 operating core values at all times in your congregation. Our core beliefs. What is it that makes you Lutheran Christian? And I know this won't shock you, but that'll be nuanced if you are in Minnesota as opposed to if you're in the Gulf Coast Synod, right? Right? What makes you a Lutheran Christian? An ELCA Lutheran Christian as opposed to some other flavor of Lutheran Christian, right? And we know there's huge differences there. Those are our beliefs. Then we look at core convictions. What are the things that make you St. Paul's instead of St. John's? See, that makes you your congregation. And then, because each congregation will also, people always think, this is normal, but then they go somewhere else in another Lutheran congregation, and guess what? They have a different normal. And so that's what I'm talking about. What are your convictions that hold for who you are? Congregations that work on those convictions sometimes are surprised. Again, my home congregation did this work, and they were shocked, and I can't understand why, to discover that they were a place of healing and hope. They have 12 recovery groups that meet during the week in this congregation, more than any other place in the city of Houston. They have houses, apartments where people can stay at while they're getting healthcare treatments at MD Anderson Cancer Center. So you see what I mean? They're doing all this healing. They didn't even realize they were doing. It just hadn't been like under an umbrella. Yeah.
Was that post going through the process, or was that already in place? I'm just curious.
All that work was happening.
Okay.
The ministry has been happening for 25 years, but it wasn't named. They didn't claim it as their value. We have a value of healing and hope. Guess how that has shifted them? They now have a 6:10, yes, it's at 6:10, on Sunday night, a healing service every week. For the people who come to these recovery groups, but for anybody. The people who are recovering from cancer, for any of us who are recovering from life. It's huge. It's my favorite service. So once you figure out these core convictions, it can help drive the other core value, and that is your core practices. These are the things you actually do. Okay? And the core practices, frankly, friends, are the things we need to change. Most of the time, our core practices are serving a church that no longer is effective, or in a world that has changed, and we need to evaluate them. But what's great about knowing these core values is to recognize that the big changes are happening on our practices, not on our beliefs. You see the difference? It can give you confidence as a group of leaders in helping shape your congregation. Yeah.
I felt like I just heard you say, though, that you're identifying your practices informed, revealed what your convictions were.
They do, but there will be plenty of practices that will also need to stop or need to be tweaked in order to further align with your purpose and a clear belief. And here's the thing, as we move forward in this unchurched world, we cannot assume when people come that they understand what we believe. We have to teach our beliefs, and even to ourselves, we can do better with that. That's remarkable centering. Remarkable exploring is asking, why do we do this? Should we keep doing this? Can we stop doing this? Will anybody even notice? Like asking those hard questions, taking a hard look at our theology, taking a hard look at our staffing and at our governance, which frankly I never thought I'd care about, but I really care about now. Our governance is often in the way. This is, how do new things happen here? And if there are not pathways for new things to happen, then you are moving into stalled or out of breath. There's no getting around it. New things have to be able to happen. And people who are serious about control, frankly, need to have a little one-on-one so that they can relax and realize that actually it's God's church. Sorry, I have a bias on that. It is God's church. We just get to attend it, right? And we could do better. The other thing we get after in exploring is around generosity, helping people engage in generosity. And we've got resources for those things, by the way. And then our final process we're doing is called the dig down process. This process on connection has to do with relationships. This has to do with welcoming and hospitality. And every congregation I visit thinks they're friendly. I know. And they're, friendly to each other. But a new person may not feel that friendship. And so working on this really matters. And beefing up our hospitality. Taking a look at how we are seriously working with faith formation, which happens out of our relationships. What kind of mentoring? But also taking a look at the isms. What are the places where we could stretch the way in which we're doing our relationships? So the connecting work, we call it workout because it's working out of your comfort zone. That's the work there. I want to say that making change in a congregation has also changed. We used to think that in the change spectrum you would have to really move to about the midline before you could shift the culture. But actually, what I'm seeing more and more is if the people who are leading can get on board with making changes in the congregation, new things can happen without everybody building consensus and being on board. So I guess I just want to say that by way of giving you some courage. My PowerPoint, for those of you who are wanting this, will be available through the Synod, okay? Yeah, absolutely. So I have given you, I think it's pink, a feedback card. You're probably all still holding it. Before you leave, I'd love to give you a minute to fill that out at whatever level you can, just the front side. If there are things that you know that your congregation that is doing that's remarkable, I'd love to hear it. Or if there is, the second question, something that you would like to tweak to be more remarkable, that would be awesome to hear too. So let me just give you a second to answer that question, okay? And this comes back to me, the feedback card comes back to me. Again, the disclaimer, if you give me your email address, I'm signing you up. And you're getting in our newsletter. It comes out on Thursdays. You can always, if you don't like it, unsubscribe. But I want to just be transparent about that. There is. So the fee depends on how many people are at worship in your congregation. There's like a sliding scale. Your Synod has invested dollars into this to help bring the fee down. Your fee covers the learning seminars. There are 3 learning seminars. So meals, housing, and attending that. Your fee covers monthly coaching and all of the resources as well as the assessment. And I'm sorry I don't have that. I should have that to give you, but if you make a note on there, I'll email you the information. Yeah, I would think so, but I'll make sure it is, okay? And Pastor Pete Royce is your DEM, and he's the one on the staff that I'm working with. So, and I would say this, it can be paid in installments. And I do want to say, please don't let whatever the fee is freak you out, because if you don't invest money, you don't invest. I'm sorry. You know, so don't be afraid. Most people do not fund this through their budget. They fund it through a coalition of people who want to see this happen in their congregation. So just saying that. But again, if the money is what's stopping you from participating, talk to Pastor Pete and I about that, because it shouldn't be prohibitive, honestly. Yeah.
For smaller congregations, it's amazing how much of a sliding fee it is, and what we get with the coaching and the retreats and the learnings and stuff. I mean, it's probably the best money I've spent. And we were very creative in where we found it out. No budget money, other places.
Yeah, usually not in the budget. Great. Okay. If you can, you may not have had time to fill that completely out, but our time is up. So I just want to wrap up by saying,
Is that what I do?
We have an opportunity to really work at flipping our church inside out. What if out was really in? Think about this for a minute. Think about what's happening on your phone. Think about the exponential opportunity that people have to influence. I'm a grandma. I have 5.5 grandkids. I'm getting a new one in July. And they don't all live down the street. And I spend a lot of time speaking God's grace into this telephone to my kids who live around the country. And if you think about the amount of people that anyone can touch by using the social media that we have access to today, friends, you can't possibly think the church is going to die. There's no way the church is going to die. The way we do church is going to change. Hopefully, your congregation will change too. It may not. The form of church that we are today is going to struggle until we begin to do new things. There's just no way I can give you good news on that. The truth is, the form of church that is dear to your heart is not going to make it into your great-grandchildren's lives. It's not. It will be different. But God is here. God is going ahead of us and leading us the way, and we can have confidence in this. Just exactly like we're about to celebrate our 500th anniversary, Luther couldn't have predicted this, right? I don't think he'd even liked it, actually. He for sure couldn't have predicted this. I guarantee you the Apostle Paul, who was leading house churches with, between 30 and 40 people meeting in little shops back in the first century Christianity, had no vision of this. Every time the church has gone through one of these renewal times, it has actually grown. And so I just want to give you that hope as we close. And I'm going to have to zip through some of this, because it is time. You guys have 10 o'clock, right? Oh yeah, 11 o'clock. Sorry, I'm really late. All right, so we're going to, here's my last punchline. What if we were the remarkable Lutheran Church in America, right? I mean, that would be awesome. And everybody knew who we were. That's the church we want to be part of. Yeah. So let's pray together. Can you read this with me? We'll pray this together. O God, you have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you so much.